What is up, everyone? I wanted to start by saying that with everything I wanted to talk about, I estimated that the length of this video would be about an hour's worth of myself speaking. So it was recommended to me that I split this video into different parts since I want to go through a ton of information. With that being said, welcome to episode 1 of my The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past pre-release showcase. I fully intend to continue working on editing this ROM, and then record more for you guys at a later date. As of recording this audio right now, I have 2 more episodes worth of content, so I hope you all look forward to it. In late July, I want to say around July 24th of 2020, I could be a day or 2 off with that, there was a massive data breach that revealed tons of Nintendo's assets and other information that was meant to be kept private. This was dubbed as the Nintendo Gigaleak at the time because it was about 2 gigabytes worth of files. From these files, many pre-release sprites, as well as the source code for a few games went public. One game I was interested in was 1991's The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past for the Super Nintendo because I consider that game as my baby. Early maps, sprites, and other assets still in the planning stages were revealed before the main direction of the game's story and art style were finalized. This is highly interesting for myself and others because it potentially shows how different the game could have been, and also because it showcases cut content that was later used for Zelda sequels. Thankfully, sprite and level editors already exist so that we can reinsert what many of these elements used to look like in action before the final product. In this video, I will be showcasing my own personally modified assets in this game. To clarify what I mean when I say my own, a modified ROM already exists, released by Zelda, that showcases many of the Gigaleak sprites. This ROM, which you can Google yourself, has edits that showcase as many pre-release elements as possible, but doesn't place them in locations where they are 100% meant to be, and also has many graphical glitches due to sprite removals and replacements in the bin file. In contrast, my edits are only meant to recreate the pre-release as closely as possible, and are also based on old magazine scans from promotion material before we ever got our hands on the game. Don't worry, I won't babble on much longer for you guys. Most of this is just a disclaimer before I get to the meat of this video. I feel like I also must explain that I will not refer to any of the Gigaleak files as prototype, alpha, or beta files. This is because there are sprites that underwent several iterations from the initial concept of the game all the way through to its final phases of development. For example, there may be objects in the game where the artist has drawn 10 different samples to choose from over time, or may include a few different sketches of ideas via sprite art. We don't know which of the many objects span from alpha, beta, or any other kind of development cycle, so I'm going to call everything pre-release just to cover all of my bases. With all of that finally out of the way, let's go. The way I'm structuring this video is thusly. I will show the final release screenshot and the pre-release comparison side by side. I will then place my modified ROM screenshot below both of those so that you can clearly see the edits I made, along with explaining the methods I used to achieve the result if needed. Please enjoy. So what better place to begin other than the beginning? As you can see, the title screen will have the Zelda logo fade in, along with a nice sword graphic striking through the letter Z. A background is then revealed, showing Hyrule Castle, its moat with nice reflections, and some landscape in the background against a blue sky. I'm telling you all of this for a reason. Now here's the pre-release screenshot with some notable differences. I carefully analyzed and concluded that the red outline in the final logo is not yet present here. Still looking at the logo, there are other very slight differences, including thickness in the lettering that you may overlook if you're not paying attention. It's safe to presume that, while it's possible the sword graphics may have already been designed, it was not yet meant to strike through the letter Z at this point in development, as can be proven with the placement of the text The Legend of. This text would simply be in the way and appear ugly. In the final release, this text is adjusted to the right in order to make room for the sword's graphics. In my remake of this titled screen, which is not just a mock-up, it is real and actually working in my version of the ROM, you can see how I attempted to recreate this pre-release screenshot to the best of my ability. One of the first things you may notice is that I changed the subtitle of the game. Allow me to speak about this a little bit because I know I'm going to need to explain a few things to some people. The original intended title for this game was meant to be Triforce of the Gods, as is the literal translation of the Japanese title of the same game, Kamigami no Triforce. Nintendo of America's localization team prefers to both censor and change elements of games that they believe may contain ideas that bring discomfort to families in the West, including sexual innuendos, drug references, and religious ideas. This is well known and has already been showcased in countless translated games for decades, so for some reason, someone decided to go with A Link to the Past. I never did like this title, and it always bothered me as a kid, because I didn't understand what part the past played in this game, other than it taking place before the two previous Zelda titles in the timeline. Which honestly, I think that's all there is to the name. What bothers me is that the name has absolutely nothing to do with the plot or storyline. I prefer the original intended title, end of story. I had to make the subtitle a bit scrunched up because I don't possess the knowledge or have a program that allows me to change where the game tells the sprites to be placed on the screen. It needs to be in a fixed position. The letters HEL in the Legend of are also copied and used in the bottom part of the subtitle in order to save resources. This is done immensely throughout the game, which I will mention again later in this video, so pay attention. Because of this, I only had a limited amount of space to work with, so I had to draw it in a way that made it fit and not look too horrible. You may be asking how I know the title screen in this pre-release image is black and that the background simply hasn't appeared yet. After all, I could have very easily snapped this screenshot in the final release and have it look similar to this. Well, my friend, to answer your question, I need to speak about the pre-release sword graphic that you see in my modded game. Each sprite tile contains a certain number of colors from a palette. What your eyes see as black sprites on this sword's hilt, and the leftmost palette color that was used for this, are actually transparent sprites. This was exactly what was used in this sword's graphics. With this, I can prove that the pre-release title screen was originally planned to stay black, just like the Japanese release. Let me further explain to you how I know this. At first, I used this sword's graphics and kept the mostly blue background as it was. As you can see here, the hilt of the sword looks horrible. But against a black background, it looks perfectly fine. At some point, the developers decided they wanted a nice, lovely background to accompany the logo, but then they had to change the sword's appearance, which is the one we're all accustomed to seeing in the international release of the game. As a side note, I altered the date a bit to kind of give an estimate of when I expect I won't do any further work on my version of the ROM. It's in no way important to this video, but I wanted to see how far I could go with the edits with my limited skill set. I don't think there's much of a way to tell if the word Zelda for the pre-release logo has any textures at this point, since it's an overexposed image. I'm more inclined to think it's just plain red with no texture, but I won't change that in my version because it's an unknown at this time. I tried to organize the sequence of scenes to show you all so that I'm not doing all of the long-winded descriptions all at once. Some of these screenshots have very small changes, so I am thinking of you guys and hopefully doing you all a favor by breaking them up in a way that I believe is logical. This screenshot includes 4 changes compared to the final ROM. Did you spot them all? The first thing you may notice is the sign that Link is carrying above his head. The Nintendo Gigaleak has many different designs for signs, all of which may have been placeholders or contenders over time to what the final ones might look like. I'm brand new in the world of sprite editing and ROMs, so I just picked one of the many designs for this. It does appear to have an image of a skull for whatever reason, so one might believe it could easily have belonged in the Dark World. However, to my knowledge, this is all mostly unknown. The 3 other changes are a part of the HUD, the icons for rupees, arrows, and life. I changed the arrows to appear how they did in early pre-release screenshots. It's as simple as that, there's no more to say about it. The rupee color, however, I actually questioned. When I originally edited it with the palette I was using, it displayed as green when I played the ROM. But in some old magazine scans, I noticed that it was also red. This does happen in future Zelda games where you upgrade your wallet and the icon changes color, but I was suspicious that they would implement this mechanic in such an old game and then remove it. The plus symbol that displays beside the word life is another instance of Nintendo of America's localization team censoring any religious connotations. The idea of giving life and cross symbols can easily be seen as religious ideas, and Nintendo didn't potentially want any trouble coming their way because of how sensitive the subject is for many people. In the final release, it was changed to dashes. Now for a fun fact, in the pre-release, the maximum number of Link's hearts used to be only 16 in this game, just like Zelda 1 for the NES. It seemed to be changed to 20 hearts fairly close to its release date, based on the fact that the 16 heart idea was already in promotional material. Here, there is only one change, and if you're not familiar with A Link to the Past or haven't played the game in a very long time, you may not see it right away, but the shape of the stone tablet is different, or rather, the perspective. The final release depicts the object with perfect 90-degree angles. However, I actually quite enjoy the pre-release version of this artwork much more because I believe it gives the stone tablet a better sense of depth, height, or 3D believability, if you will. There are two differences I made in this scene. One of the changes are just one of a few variations of jar graphics. I'm not sure why they are depicted as grayscale because I attempted to change the colors of each sprite's location in the bin file, but to no avail. When Link lifts one above his head, they appear in color for some reason I'm unaware of. I'm still investigating this. The other change is, of course, the text. Not only am I replacing sprites in this ROM, but I'm also changing the way things are said. I'm doing this in order to give what I believe is a better, more modern flavor in a way that might be presented in a video game today. In this scene, Link's uncle normally says, "I'm going out for a while. I'll be back by morning. Don't leave the house." Well, wouldn't you question why? It doesn't really give any substantial context to Link or the player. I decided to expand upon this a bit and make his uncle seem more like a fatherly, authoritative figure in Link's life, the way a parent would actually speak to their child instead of sounding like a robot. I wanted to give more life to the characters of Hyrule. I thought it would be appropriate with this next screenshot to continue with Link's uncle. This is a pre-release sprite of Link's wounded uncle that was discovered in the Nintendo Gigaleak. He doesn't look that much different, other than the fact that here, he appears to be fully laying down, instead of sitting up like we're familiar with seeing in the final release. There is a possibility that Link was to meet up with his uncle in a more open area, maybe a different location where he could be fully laying down, but once they decided to have Link meet his uncle underneath Hyrule Castle, they realized they needed to have him sitting up against the wall, using different graphics for him to provide more believability. However, this is all speculation by myself and is very likely not the case, but anything is possible because we just don't have that information. As you can see here, I also changed the text. The final release sees Link's uncle uttering his last words of, "Zelda is your ... which of course left many of us wondering if he meant to finish with the word sister or not. I already knew that wasn't the case whatsoever, even when I was a little kid, because not once is it referenced in the game or the game's files that Link and Zelda are even related. I changed this last bit of dialogue to reflect the direct translation of the Japanese text so that it is crystal clear without question the intent of what Link's uncle is saying. The last change that you eagle-eyed fans may have spotted is that Link's lantern graphic looks different. The ROM that Zelda released has yet an even different sprite for the lantern, which is found in the Nintendo Gigaleak, which more closely resembles the final design. However, as I've stated previously, I'm only showcasing the designs that were shown in pre-release screenshots Nintendo published in magazines, which would be this lantern design. This sprite I added into the ROM was not present in the Gigaleak to my knowledge, so I painstakingly recreated each individual sprite to make it look as close to the pre-release design as I possibly could. After blurring this image and comparing it side by side, I could not spot any difference. So I'm pretty confident in stating that I believe this is the exact sprite design that once existed for Link's lantern. To start with, I'm not sure what these objects really are. Large pots? Jars? Vases? Whatever type of ornament they are, I'm gonna call them large vases here. This is another instance of just one of many different designs found in the Nintendo Gigaleak, likely samples by artists for the higher-ups to choose what design they admire the most. These are the large vases that you see in pre-release promotion material for this game, so I decided to pick this one to inject back into the ROM. Please disregard my palette swatches in the bottom corners of the sprites. I forgot to remove them, as can also be seen in future screenshots. Well, that's all I have for this video. I hope you look forward to episode 2 of this personal docu-series that I'm putting together, if you can call it as such. I've never put this much work into a video before, so this is definitely something that I'm personally proud of. I hope you enjoyed everything I've showcased so far, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye guys.